A terrible accident changed the mood as the crew stood on the wet deck. They had just pulled in their final line, with crab nets overflowing from the waves. Cheers echoed through the boat, as they had hit their goal out at sea. But the celebration shifted into fear as danger crept near the vessel's edge. Without warning, the water surged, making every movement a risk on the slippery surface. One of their bravest fishermen would soon meet a fate that would bring silence to the stormy sky. The wind howled and the ocean roared, turning their task into a brutal battle. Jake's team had pulled almost 60 heavy pots across the rough northern waters. They went further than most, past the usual borders, seeking a dream catch. Each trap was bursting with 200 to 300 crabs, an almost unreal sight in the ice-cold sea. The joy of that moment faded as the sky darkened and hope was drowned by violent weather. Rain began pounding sideways, with waves crashing against the tilting deck. Inside the cabin, a strange beep echoed from the sonar, catching everyone's attention. Jake's instincts, shaped by years on water, told him something was dangerously wrong. He warned the crew about the anchor cable, fearing it could snap in the chaos. A snapping cable meant a whipping death trap across the wooden planks. The sea slammed the vessel again, blinding every eye and shaking every soul. Jake shouted over the madness, trying to bring focus back on the dangerous deck. The winch began twisting, threatening those too close to the coiled wire. Suddenly, a deckhand tripped as the cable jerked, and time seemed to freeze on board. The crew gasped as panic flooded the air, hearts racing under the stormy skyline. Through the swirling mist, another ship appeared, the Wizard, far too close. Jake had seen her before, but never in such violent sea conditions. A collision looked certain as both crews fought to control their boats in the powerful current. They missed each other by inches, but the terror remained like fog above the water. Jake stayed silent, ignoring the other captain, focusing instead on his crew's safety. The sea doesn't care about experience, it only follows its own rules. One wrong step, one slip on a soaked floor, and tragedy struck without mercy. A fisherman fell, vanishing into the freezing water, his scream lost in the ocean's roar. The black waves swallowed him before anyone could throw a rope or call out. The crew stood still, horrified, realizing their lucky day had turned to sorrow. Their overflowing tanks meant nothing compared to the man they lost to the sea's depths. Jake yelled commands to keep them moving, but the momentum had shifted. Each wave now felt like a punishment, crashing against their hearts and the ship's frame. There was no room for grief, only cold hands clinging to wet railings and frozen hope. From below, another strange noise echoed, not the cable, but something unfamiliar. Jake's gut tightened as he stood in the shaking wheelhouse, fearing what came next. Staying in this part of the sea any longer could mean more death. He watched his crew, eyes full of fear, hands shaking on icy metal. Every decision now was a line between life and the ocean's grave. On the radio, the Wizard's captain shouted in anger, blaming Jake for the near collision. But there was no time to fight, not when the Bering Sea was already punishing enough. This ocean has no sympathy, and every wave carries risk deeper than it appears on the surface. Just when calm seemed near, another black storm formed on the far-off horizon. The Wizard's crew worked silently, fixing ropes and drying soaked gear. Their captain tried to lift their spirits, but his voice couldn't erase the fear. Inside their thoughts, the real storm brewed, one made of doubt and quiet dread. They knew this life was cruel and the next tragedy could belong to their crew. It was Jake's team today, but it could be anyone tomorrow lost in the ocean's silence. Another massive swell slammed into Jake's ship, nearly throwing Jacob into the sea. He caught the rail, face pale, heart thudding beneath his soaking jacket. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile only worn to hide deep fear beneath the rain. Jake saw it in his eyes and shouted a sorry, but there was no time to talk. Jacob just waved him off, still rattled by his near death under the cloudy sky. Far away, on the summer bay, Captain Wild Bill faced his own nightmare. A crewman slipped, crashing into the icy water, swallowed for a moment by white foam. They pulled him out alive, but he could barely move from the cold's grip. Bill knew they had to continue, but the fear stuck like salt on their wet skin. Second chances are rare in the Bering Sea, and they barely earned this one. That week, Captains Jake, Wild Bill, Keith, and Harley had all faced the edge of disaster. They endured loss, near crashes, brutal weather, and emotional wounds. It wasn't about money anymore, it became about survival on an endless, angry ocean. The sea doesn't care about dreams, it knows only how to crush them beneath waves. Fishermen keep going not for safety, but for the thrill, for the challenge. Yet sometimes, the price is too high, and no catch is worth the sorrow that follows. Jake felt this in his bones, the weight of years fighting an unforgiving force. Every seasoned captain knows the ocean doesn't forget or forgive. When it spares you, you don't question it, you simply count your luck and keep sailing over the water. Subscribe to our channel and thanks for watching.